Live. Yes, I think we are live.
We are
Cool.
live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Factors.ai LinkedIn Live Road to Revenue series. Today, we have a very special guest, Mafalda Johansson. I learned a lot about the word Mafalda itself while I was researching for the podcast. I know it's a common Portuguese name. I also got to know there is an Argentinian cartoon which is very popular named Mafalda. I don't know whether it's also related to Matilda, but it's that's quite interesting. And I know Mafalda is actually half Portuguese. Half Portuguese?
Half
Yes,
Portuguese.
half Portuguese. And I also know many people confuse her saying that, okay, if you know Portuguese, you can actually sell in Latin America. There are a lot of things which is dissimilar. So there are a lot of interesting insights like this, which I got to get started with the podcast. But this podcast is a very technical and more serious topic around selling to technical buyer personas, which is what we'll come into. So, welcome again. Thanks a lot to come in for the third LinkedIn Live of from Factors.ai this year. Welcome all. Hi, Mafalda. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you? Thanks so much for inviting me. And yes, you said a lot of good things about my name, and that was the reason. The Argentinian cartoon was actually the reason why my mom decided to name me Mafalda. So for those who don't know the cartoon, I really recommending checking out because it's very smart and it's translated in many languages. So probably you can find
Seriously?
on your native language. So yeah, thanks for having me.
That's good. I have an 8-year-old. I will surely introduce her to the cartoon for sure. I'll go reach out and other this thing. So, Mafalda, before we get into the more detailed technical buyer personas for sales and other things, you can just introduce yourself briefly
Absolutely.
and also about your company, what they do. And I'll also give you another tidbit like how it is related to another LinkedIn Live which we did recently. But I'll let you first talk about that.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, Mafalda, I have Portuguese, as you mentioned, half German, even though I was born and raised in Portugal. So I'm native Portuguese speaker. I'm fluent German speaker, not native. So I've been in Wonderway for 3 years. I'm head of commercial, so head of growth.
Mhm.
And even though we sell now to salespeople, my background is selling to technical personas. That's why we're here. And Wonderway is basically a sales enablement platform on one hand, where you can onboard your employees, your sales reps efficiently. And on the other hand, we developed an AI coach that can listen to your sales call and give you personalized feedback in every call, like a manager would be there. So this is what we do. And now I'm selling to sales enablement, sales leaderships, founders. But I used to sell to very technical roles. And I remember when I start prospecting salespeople, the difference was so huge. I was like, oh, this is Christmas. People reply, people like my emails. I did a cold call and people were like, I am a father, sorry for not replying to your email. I was like, what? So selling to technical personas is very challenging. There is
Mhm.
no much information about that, and I think that's why we are here today. So looking
That's
forward
true.
to dive into that.
Yes, that's where we are. While we are talking about technical buyer personas, it's a totally different topic. Very interestingly, it's like kind of serendipity. Last week we had a call, LinkedIn Live with Sri Harsha of Hyperbound, which is kind of an AI-enabled call agent, AI-enabled sales training agent, which is there.
Oh, there you go.
And that's like this is a pretty. It was like a very different thing. I mean, it was like wow. We first talked about AI enabled, then we are talking to another person from AI enabled, but who's talking about some other topic. So kind of a meta level
We are
uh,
everywhere.
coordination which is happening. So I don't know whether I got retargeted by a ad or by a Neura link into actually calling you in for this
It's
LinkedIn
working. It's
live.
working.
It's working. Something there is something which is happening, and maybe that's really great. But Mafalda, let's narrow down to a little more this thing. Um, there are a lot of B2B and SaaS companies, and in the sales and martech world, it's pretty simple because sales and marketing people are very social, highly engaging. They are looking at emails, they are looking at LinkedIn, they are pretty active in every other platform which you can see, and they're also kind of wired in into what is happening. They're not going to be like, if someone reaches out, they're not going to be rude, they're not going to be like ignoring, they're not going to think, they'll try to
Sometimes
actually
they
have
are,
that,
but less. But
but
less.
less,
Yeah.
much lesser the thing, because they also understand it's their grind. So because if you're selling to SDRs, if you're an SDR, the SDR is not going to say like, okay, don't call me. So like, okay, this is not something which I'm interested in. That's something. But technical buyer personas is a whole new different world.
Oh
And
yeah.
plenty of SaaS companies, right from the likes, and quite a few. We have 225 customers. Many of our customers are selling to data engineers. Many of our customers are selling to CTOs. I was just finishing a technology call where, a demo call where the buyer persona is fundamentally chief information security officers. That's the only title which they
The
carry.
most difficult one, yes.
Horrific one. Or like another set where like we had another call in the morning where like they want to sell to AI engineers only, not general engineers, not this thing. And it's even more difficult to find who's an AI engineer in the company because everyone
Yeah,
wants to put I'm doing AI, but there are
yeah.
software engineers, there are ML engineers, there are AI engineers, and this thing. So this is like one. It's a very different buyer group. Second, it is also very tough to actually find who's actually doing what and how to filter that. And most importantly, sales guys are of a certain variety. I mean, I am doing sales because I'm not a geek. I'm not a coder, and I
Same
haven't
here.
built to talk like a coder. But on the other hand, ML engineers are very different. They think very differently, or a AI or any technical buyer personas, they think very differently. They are totally on the sales side and totally on the technical side. So relating to them and selling to them is a kind of like you're talking a totally different language. It's like someone like from uh, who's a German trying to come into India and trying to learn Hindi and trying to talk to someone in Hindi. It's a totally different language group. It's not coming even in the similar language group, which is there.
Absolutely.
So this is one personally for me, it's very exciting because I'd also like to know like how do I get to talk that language and make the sale for them. And lastly, which most people actually miss out, selling to technical buyer personas and sales is one very high ACV and very long contracts as well.
Yeah.
Sales and marketing tools get churned fast and sometimes even low ACV. There's a huge kind of competition. But if you get into, let's say, like if you're selling a kind of a distributed database, or if you're selling a particular information security software, if you're selling a cyber security threat perception software, which is it, or even a pen testing software, you get in, you are a customer for almost 5 to 6 years, which is there. And it's also high ACV. And companies don't question about actually buying for it. For example, if I sell even a good Martech software, it's going to land in the CFO's table where it's like, okay, do we actually have to spend it? Can we do it with 2 interns and other things? But people are now going to ask like whether we can do a pen test with 2 interns and other this things. So people are going to approve this thing. So this is a very lucrative segment to sell into, but also a hard segment to sell into. So instead of blabbering a lot more, I will just give the floor back to you. Please
Yeah, yeah,
help
yeah.
us, teach us how to sell to technical buyer personas.
So I have bad news, which is I don't have a bulletproof tip, and even though I have a lot of experience on that, it's still difficult for me. So let's start with difficult part of the topic. But I also have good news, and I think the first step is exactly everything you just mentioned, which is you have to understand where you are. You have to understand what you just mentioned, that
Mhm.
we don't speak the same language, we have different backgrounds, their tool adoption is higher than in others, so it's hard for them to switch from one vendor to the other. So I think that the first step is actually acknowledging where you are, right?
Okay.
So and understand, and if the better you understand the challenges of your
Mm.
situation of selling to these people, then the better you are in terms of success to be able to connect with them. So I would add a couple of more. I think you started really, really greatly, which is they do care a lot about adoption. So usually these people, they usually see a three main things. So they care
Mhm.
about people, processes, and technology, right? Those are the three pillars that they care about. Then within the technology, within the tools, obviously then it comes from case to case, but in general, technical personas, they care if the adoption is good. So they don't want to buy something that then their teams won't use. They
Mhm.
want to buy something that's credibility. So they get a lot of suggestions from their peers. So
Mhm.
usually when a CISO, when a head of technology is looking for a tool, is usually asking in forums and to other fellow CTOs or fellow CISOs. That's very important to understand. They don't like to try tools that haven't been much used. So in this part, startups have a more difficult job here than enterprise solutions, because they don't like as much to try new, like not as much proven tools, also because of a lot of technical personas are related to security. Not only the CISOs, that's basically their world, but the chief technology officers, a lot of what they do have a lot of security concerns. So a tool that hasn't been long in the market, it's usually harder to sell to them. I'm not saying it's impossible. That's why we have startups who sell to technical personas, but you definitely have your job even harder than ones that are more established.
So let me just break this down a bit so that it's one thing is like, one, they care about adoption. They care about like whether people are going to use it, whether there are people within the team which are going to use it. That's one part. Second is they also care about whether this is something which they can trust, or this is something which they want to actually take in and other the thing. So for example, and third is like, there is a lot of inertia as well. That is like, they already have an existing tool, they don't want to move it. So this makes it doubly hard for startups, because they are going to replace an existing incumbent. Second, they don't have that kind of a trust factor, or like hundreds of reviewers and other this thing which they can break down and other this thing. So which is basically like, being a startup is tough, but now if you're going to sell to a technical set of people, and also where people who don't want to move, and also they are looking for reputation to sell, it's like a half battle lost before you even begin. And this thing, how do you address either of these concerns? Or if you are a startup in this kind of a field, how would you go about addressing this?
So basically, they also care about tools that empower their employees, that basically either replace part of a job that it's like mind dumbing, or it's very difficult and expensive to do it in house, or that's something will make the processes faster as well and more efficient, right? So whenever you have a tool that does these things, right, so that you really can like increase the productivity of a tech team within with all the security matters resolved, then they probably want to hear. The thing is, maybe you are a startup or not, or even you're an established company, and you have that tool and you believe that it does that also, because probably you already have some customers. So those customers bought from you for a reason, right? Why? You should be asking that question. You should be asking your actual customers couple of questions. The reason why did you buy from us and not our competitors? How was the buying process? How do you like to acquire tools? Was there anything in the process that you'd like us to improve, or that really stood out? And also understanding as well what was the trigger to make you buy the tool, right? So not only why against our competitors, that's another thing. This is why are we better than others, but before you even ask that question, is like, what made you purchase a tool like us or our competitors in the first place? And that what and when, if it happened to a couple of customers, you might have prospects out there with the same problem, right? With the same what.
So you craft the messaging, or like you craft the messaging based on like on what, maybe let's say your existing 10 or 15 customers bought you, why they bought you, when they bought you exactly. Then you can narrow down into like going after customers or prospects who might have this thing.
ICP.
Second thing is ICP. Second is Mark asked a pretty interesting question. That's okay. We understand why what else is in. For example, we bought Single Store when we were an early stage company, because it's like we wanted to process a lot of data, we wanted to distribute a database, and then we bought Single Store and other this thing. And Single Store found us, and because we wanted it, and then we bought it. But the more important thing is, how do you prospect companies? So if I'm trying to sell a distributed database, if I'm trying to sell a pen testing tool, if I'm trying to sell let's say even a tool like Scrud.io or a Sprinto, how do I go about prospect? Does it make sense to cold call? Does it make sense to actually just get them to start using the product in some way, give free trials, premiums? How do you get that kind of like any form of inbound motion or an outbound motion, just to have totally known this thing?
Those are great questions. Obviously, it depends from persona to persona and territory to territory. So a CISO in a small startup in Sweden is different from a CISO in an enterprise in India, right? So you should be interviewing your customers to get those answers. However, in general,
So let's say we can look at US companies selling to CISOs or selling to technical engineers and CTOs.
So it's a bit different even within the technical personas. So for example, CISOs, I never sold to CISOs, but I've done an episode where I interviewed CISOs, and CISOs are very focused on data protection. So and their main, it's on their name, Chief Security Officer, right? So security, it's very important. CISOs and other technical people, as I mentioned at the beginning, security is a big thing. So they won't click on links they don't trust, right? So they will build really, really strong firewalls to avoid even these emails to come into your mailbox. They will also, they also care about data protection a lot. So they also don't enjoy many times receiving unsolicited emails, right? So a phone call has the advantage of it's not dangerous, right? You don't carry viruses on a cold call. So there are a lot of people who sell to CISOs who use cold calling a lot, for example. But then you have the issue of you probably shouldn't be calling their mobile phone because of data. But then again, each country has different data protection rules. Germany is very strong. The US is much less. So once again, you have to check what are the rules of your market and where you are and where you can go, right?
Got it.
Then LinkedIn has the advantage of not being as dangerous, doesn't carry viruses, but they go there less as well. So you need to also create trust from the beginning that they can. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't send them links one day, but not before they trust you, right? So you shouldn't send links on the first email. They will be blocked and they will not click for sure. Whereas a salesperson or a more commercial person like me, I'm like, oh, this sounds interesting, I'm going to click. I don't think twice. Rationally, I know I shouldn't do that, but I do, right? Because I'm not a technical persona. So also the other thing that I really recommend, if not at the first one, because again, firewalls, but something that worked for me when I was prospecting technical personas was sending voice notes on LinkedIn, because they don't carry viruses, right? There is no harm there. They cannot click on the thing and get viruses. Obviously, it doesn't mean that they will click on everything right away, but it worked really well because it's not dangerous. And also, if I want to send a video of myself speaking to them on the third email, again, not on the first one, because again, trust and links, put it a thumbnail so they can see you. If you put your video as a link, once again, they won't click on it. And more importantly than the channels, whether it's cold calling, whether it's emailing, whether it's LinkedIn, the most important thing is you know what you're talking about. With technical personas, unlike, especially because, for HR, for marketing, for sales, we are all in that department. So we don't need to study as much because we are kind of our own personas. So sometimes understanding a bit of your solution and understanding a bit of your persona is enough. When you're selling to someone that you don't know at all, that's not enough. You need to start, before you start the outreach, you really need to go in depth of the persona. And when I mean in depth, it means really understand the persona and understand the jargon. They love to use terminology and jargon. So you need to understand the language they use, and you need to study a bit of that, right? So I can give you a bit of an example. In my previous company, we used to sell to three personas: product, engineering, and quality assurance. Obviously, product was the easiest one to prospect because they're a bit more closer to the commercial side. But QA and engineering was very difficult. The thing is, if you hit the spot, so if you write something that compelling to them, they will reply to you. So if you hit the spot, you will, because if they see that you did your research, you understand their role and what they're going through, and you tie that to your possible solution, they are likely to reply as well. But that means a lot of homework to be done before starting the outreach, more than usual. And I don't think companies spend enough time on that.
Got it. So that's
They
like,
are too busy.
they're busy. So let's just break this down. And there were quite a few insights. Like, one, don't send emails. You'll get blocked. Mostly nobody is going to touch. Phone calls work because you have a number and you have the ability to come back to phone calls. I'll come back to which provider for phone calls works very well. Voice notes on LinkedIn works, which is pretty interesting because, like, don't send LinkedIn messages, they're not there, but if you send a voice note, it works. If you're sending videos, send it with a thumbnail rather than with just a link, because just a link, people are kind of very about to actually you want to do. Most importantly, know any kind of like well researched and personalized emails with the jargons and other things, rather than a simple outbound junk or outbound kind of like, hey, this is what we do, would you like to have a brief chat?
Yeah,
If you go a little
absolutely.
deep, and if you go this thing, if you have technically this thing, that comes out very, very well. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So the emails work, but the first one has to be plain. No images, no attachments, no nothing. Like, and as you mentioned, like, it all, like, I'm a fan of multi-channel approach. So you should be doing all of this, not one or the other, right? So I think that's the most important thing. You should do all of this in a cadence, in a sequence that makes sense, but taking into account that because they don't go as often on LinkedIn. So maybe your voice note will be there until they log in a week, right? So maybe if you send an email and the voice note, then they will open the voice note more easily because they saw your email. So one feeds the other, and people, like, whether you're selling to technical personas or to other commercial roles, like, especially nowadays, it's getting even harder to prospect. You cannot neglect channels. So you should do a multi-touch from email, videos, voice notes, liking posts on LinkedIn, cold calling, yada, yada, yada. But something that you mentioned that makes a lot of sense is a lot of emails from sales, the CTA is, are you interested to chat, or would you have 15 minutes to take the call? Maybe that's not the right CTA for a CTO. Maybe the CTA should be, can I send you more information on this, right? And then you send the link or the case study or the free trial. They do like, because once again, you have to bear in mind, these people love to research. So, and I asked a lot of them, because I have a podcast, A Day in the Life, where I interview buyer personas, and I have an episode on heads of data and CTOs and quality assurances, and I just launched one with CISOs. So a lot of the things I've seen is the first thing they do if they find your email interesting is not replying. They will research your company. So probably the reply won't be, yes, let's chat. Will be, okay, this sounds interesting. This person actually did some research. This is better than the other 50 emails I received today. And then they go to the website and then they draw conclusions. So the next step would be like, have you checked our website, or can I send you more information of this, or is there anything unclear that you like me to So maybe this would be to respect their time so they don't feel pushed, because they also have very bad image about salespeople. They don't like us. They find us annoying. They think we do a lot of things that are not legal in terms of data protection. And also, like, I understand they receive 50 emails a day or even more with terminology they don't use, with things that are not interesting to them. So you also have to understand they have this fatigue as well, which on the other hand is an advantage, because if you write something that's targeted, that uses the terminology they use, you will stand out and they will respect you more because of that.
Actually, one thing which I'm trying to understand is a lot of pre-work for an SDR before he starts even prospecting to a technical persona. That is even training from a company. If you're hiring an SDR, if you wanted this thing as a founder or even as a product marketing person, or the product person should actually generate or develop a lot of material saying that why we are separate, why this is important, why this kind of distributed database has a better latency compared to something else, or all these kind of like why this pen testing is different from some other pen testing, or why this SOC compliance methodology is better and other this thing. Create the product materials and other this thing, post a lot of them in blogs, post a lot of them in kind of how-to videos and other this thing on the website and multiple other this thing. Keep that material and research available. Then when you reach out organically and other this thing, when people check out the website, they also know that the company knows the stuff. You are also able to give the right links or PDFs and other this thing for people to check out, and then draw them in. So it's like
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
like sales and marketing. Let's say if I'm selling a kind of factors.ai, which is like generate more leads through LinkedIn, or identify which LinkedIn campaign actually attributed to your revenue or pipeline. This is a little more, when you say it, it's a little more relatable. People can see it without actually, I can train an SDR to do it much faster. In a technical buyer persona, if I'm selling a database or something of that sort, I need to actually spend a couple of months for the ramp for the SDR itself to start being able to do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
other this thing, which is that one interesting question Alan has also asked it, and I also had one other this thing is like, what kind of research do you do on the company and person, and which kind of tools do you use to do the research? Because LinkedIn wouldn't show, they would be pretty conservative. They may not have even put their phone or photo or phone numbers. They might have just said that, okay, last studied is in Caltech and other the thing, Jira has left it. Even sometimes I have seen even very senior technical folks just having software engineer in their profile. It's like they might be the chief technology officer, but they just put software engineer, nothing beyond that and other this thing. What kind of databases do you use to do research on
So
this?
that's another reason why it's so tough to prospect these people. It's like lack of triggers and lack of information to do a personalized approach. So even if you're like, I'm very committed to SDR, I want to do my best, and then you have nothing to work with. Literally, it happened to me, it happens to everyone. So yes, I have a couple of suggestions. So as I said, when you cannot personalize because everything you just mentioned, relevance is the most important thing. So if you hit at pain they have with the solution, even if you don't know anything else about the person, which university they went for, if they have dogs or cats, it doesn't matter. They're gonna reply to you. The challenge is, how do you know that, right? How can I make my outreach relevant, right? But there are a couple of things. So one of the things that I recommend doing is going on Google and research persona mind map. So CTO mind map, CISO mind map, and you will have a mind map. So basically, mind map is like a map of all the priorities and challenges and how they think. So in one image, you have a lot of information about that role. This is one of the ways. The other way is, and that's what I think it lacks a lot, and also on the content materials from the companies. Usually, at least what I've seen is usually have one pager about the buyer persona. So you're selling to CTOs. They don't like this, they like that. Those are the KPIs. Good luck, right? But the thing is, and like our challenges and our priorities, they change whether you're a technical person or not, according to the year where you are, right? So my challenges 3 years ago are different from now. 3 years ago, tech was increasing, you had a lot of financing, and everyone was working from home because of the pandemic. This has advantages and has challenges, right? Now everyone is going back to normal, but there is a recession in tech. So the challenges and priorities, they change completely. So you should be asking, whether you are a marketeer or a salesperson, when you interview your customers, you should be asking them, what changed this year? Did your priorities shift? If yes, why? So you get the trigger. What are the consequences of it, right? So you have to update your messaging in business development and in marketing according to the year you are, or even to the month, because summer is always challenging for a salesperson, right? So if you're selling to someone, if you're trying to get the attention of a VP of sales in summer, probably is different than in January, right? And so you have to understand by asking your personas, but you have the persona mind map. Something that really helps me is Forbes and Gartner, the Gartner reports. They usually, if you put like head of HR, chiefs of people officer challenges 2024, it will show up. So you can do a general research on the role. Gartner and Forbes, they have a lot of that according to the year. So you're going to have updated information. And annual reports of the company. Startups, they don't have to put annual reports, but if you're selling to enterprise, that's mandatory. And when you open an annual report, you have the goals for the next year for each department, right? There you go. That's your trigger.
Nice. Goals. So actually look at enterprise companies, especially they will articulate a lot more on the goals which they have as a technical company, where they're investing, how they're in.
But also, if you're selling to startups and you don't have access to annual reports, whenever they get a funding on the news where they say we got funding of 2 million for that, they will tell you where they're going to invest the funding on. So yes, you don't have access to the annual report, but you have access to funding news, and those news will impact everyone, right? So a company is growing wherever. I received funding, and the company is growing. Everyone from customer success to sales to product to technical people to everyone, this will impact everyone's job. How? Well, that's your job to understand that, because you should have done the research on the persona. You can even ask your questions. So I've seen that a lot of companies, a lot of head of products from these companies receive funding. If you would have received this funding, what would be the challenges for you? Like, ask your customers. I'm sure you get along with one or two at least to ask these questions, and you can then use that to the messaging. So when you reach out, you say, I saw you receive funding. Usually heads of product in this situation have these challenges. Is this your case? Like, plain easy.
Talk about the problem and ask like whether this is something.
But the problem that's specific to them, because what I see a lot, and I've seen that as well, is okay, heads of products usually have these issues. You have no context. Is the head of product in an SMB or an enterprise? Is it in Germany or is it in the States? Is it in a recession or in a growth economy? Did they receive funding or did not? Because trust me, the challenges of a marketeer with budget and without budget, it's completely different, right? So you need to understand the context, and that's why a lot of the one pager of buyer personas are a great start, but it doesn't help you convert, and especially with technical people. They expect you to know a lot. They expect you to know their language. They expect you to know things that you don't, because you're sales or marketing. You're not technical.
What about data, intent data? Does something like ZoomInfo websites intent data, or a Bombora intent data, or even website visitor and G2 data, something like we overlay, and if like which companies are coming to the website, looking at the case study or looking at
super good. Yeah, absolutely. Like intent data, when it's accurate, because sometimes it's not always accurate, but when it's accurate, it's super useful, because you have a trigger there, right? They have the intent to buy something like your product. Awesome. Also, I'm happy you mentioned G2, because I think in G2 you can see the challenges that you or your competitors are solving. So when you start reviewing, reading the reviews, you can say, oh yeah, since I adopted tool ABC, my life got easier, right? Because that's gold information, because they're not the only ones who had a challenge and need that solution. Or you can see what's your competitive advantage regarding your competitors. So if your competitor is like, oh, really like the tool, but the UX is not easy, and imagine that your tool has an easy UX. So it's like, and if you find out that a certain person that you want to prospect has the tool, you can say, hey, I've read on G2 that the user, it's not, even though it's a good tool, because never talk bad things about your competitors, the user friendliness is not the best. That's actually where you are. Would you like to explore? So right there, you're also hitting a pain point. If they're actually tired of a bad UX of that certain tool. And if they're using that tool, and if they want to change, they need to replace it somehow and somewhere. So G2 reviews are gold. And then you have to find the triggers for your own product. And that's on you, right? There is no one else can help you but you. I can give you an example. In my previous company, we were selling software testing. That's why product engineering and QA were. So for me, a good trigger was finding low app stores rating. So if the app had low rating, probably they had a lot of bugs, probably they needed help. So you need to find the trigger for your own situation as well.
That's good research. So actually, you covered up a pretty good amount of points. While of course, context, understanding customers, and then building a research point, annual reports, and looking at even their what they are telling about their commentaries and other this thing. You also came down to intent data, understanding like more like which companies are visiting your website, who's looking at your blogs, who's searching for key keywords which are coming into your blogs, which companies are there. Second is G2 intent data. I mean, if you're selling to technical personas, if you're selling a, let's say, a testing software or a database software or something like that, buying or having G2 intent data is good because you can see who's looking at grids, who can look at competitors, but you also look for more research. Even if you can't buy it, you can actually go and check out your competitor reviews, check out each and everything and what people are saying so that you can take it. Lastly, you also said like company level unique intent data. So for example, in certain places you can look at Reddit, or certain places you can go and look at app store ratings, you can look at multiple other things, see what is happening, what people are talking about, or like where the things are changing, which is that's interesting. Do you also use something like LinkedIn data in terms of like if some company has just hired a
Yes,
security officer,
absolutely. So yeah, so
hired a
it's
tester?
LinkedIn, yes, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, like absolutely. So new in the position, promotion, all of that. But once again, these triggers are great and we use them, but you need to understand what these triggers means for the persona once again. So
Okay.
so it's not like a lot of people what they usually like feel frustrated, and I understand, is okay, I did my research and I wrote a really good email saying, hey, Sri, I saw that that you just started a company, blah blah blah. Would you be looking for new tools? We'd love to chat. Like, cool, you show me that you did the research, but nowadays the research comes to you, because when you have LinkedIn Sales Navigator, it gets you, like, you get the notification, so we didn't do much research. Once again, you have to understand, a new head of, let's say, a new CRO, right? So what what does it look like its first 3 months? What are the challenges of a CRO in the first 3 months? If you have the answer to that question, especially, and if you have to go specific, imagine if you're selling only to CROs in the finance industry, right? But you don't sell to CROs in the gambling industry, right? So a CRO in the finance industry, what does he or she go through in the first 3 months? Okay, so that's how we're going to tailor your outreach. Where it's a cold call, once again, it doesn't matter the channel. Well, it does, but whether it's a cold call or an email or a LinkedIn message, if the messaging is not good, it's not the channel that will help you. So basically, you go like, okay, I saw that you just started as a CRO in this company. Usually, the CROs in this institution is yours. They go through this and that challenge. Is that your case?
Got it.
And this is way more compelling than, hey, I saw you were just hired, congrats, here's what we do.
Got it. No, that's pretty interesting. One more thing which people talk about, there are actually two questions. I mean, this is the traditional behavior thing, is like CTOs and engineers don't like LinkedIn. They don't going to be on LinkedIn. And it's like uh, permanently or kind of established in the mind space of most companies which sell to engineers and this thing, saying that
Yeah.
you shouldn't talk to these people. But LinkedIn has gone to more than 1 billion users now. It is the biggest professional network. It's a professional network. There's no questions about it. LinkedIn ads also, you can target by title and this thing. And given that there are so many, at least in the last 5 years, there are so many startups, technical engineers, so many different ways of engineers which are coming. People are also looking for jobs in LinkedIn, or they're applying for jobs. Does this whole hypothesis still exist? That is like LinkedIn is not a
Yeah.
great place to actually identify.
No, I look, I always booked calls via LinkedIn with technical personas. So LinkedIn works. Now, Is it more difficult than sales? Absolutely, but any channel is more difficult, right? So it's once again, the problem is not the channel, right? That's not your problem. The problem is everything that we've talked so far. So I've booked calls with heads of engineering, with CTOs on LinkedIn. I also I have my podcast and then the life where I interview technical personas. I get my speakers on LinkedIn. That's how I find them. That's how I invite them. Now, is it easier to do an episode on head of sales than on head of technology? Absolutely. But I got them the same way on LinkedIn, right? Took me longer, yes. But the channel works. So LinkedIn works, and even I would say even more than when I used to prospect, because as you mentioned, there are a lot of now there are a lot of engineers that were also laid off. That you have, I think engineers they got more into LinkedIn than they were before. And as again, when I ask technical people on my podcast, where do they get new ideas from? So where do they get inspired? They usually say peers, forums, colleagues, and LinkedIn. So they mention LinkedIn as well as a way to get new information. So so yeah, I think it's gonna increase even more. I think also because they also need, you start finally seeing, you have a lot of sales influencers, shitloads or marketing, but now you start seeing influencers like I now follow a CISO who is a CISO influencer. She didn't reply to me. I didn't do the episode to her, but she has a huge following. So you
Got
starting slowly and popping up influencers into technology world as well.
No, it actually makes sense because one other person actually, when he was telling, it's like engineers, they get actively sourced or pitched by recruiters on LinkedIn. Recruiters are primarily on LinkedIn. They get sourced. If they're looking for jobs on LinkedIn, if they're looking for move on LinkedIn, you can also sell to them on LinkedIn. That's one thing, which is which is pretty obvious. It's like, because now there are a lot of engineers, a lot of technology companies means a lot of recruiters trying to find engineers in multiple ways. So they should be on LinkedIn. They're also trying to get the next big move and other this thing. So there is a very good part. Like they will surely be on LinkedIn. They may not be checking every day. They might be checking at least once a week, which is there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
Second thing, LinkedIn ads should also work. That is like you can target very, very clear LinkedIn ads, or you can give them very clear product material around LinkedIn, and you can actually.
They love the research. So your inbound should be very strong. You shouldn't rely on outbound 100% when you're selling.
And as you mentioned, like you can change the CTS, like instead of having a chat, I can say like, do you want more information or do you want to subscribe to a newsletter and other this thing, and that can work pretty interestingly to convert this and the thing. One other thing which a couple of CEOs, when I was researching for this, like technical buyer personas, the thing, they also mentioned like one way to get to the engineer or the CTO or the CISO or other this thing is like actually get to the CEO or the founder. He will be active, and he might not be technical, but he's still running a technical company. He's worried about cyber threats. He's worried about security. He's worried about testing. He's worried about his app store ratings. Get to the CEO, talk about why this problem matters, and ask him for the introduction is one suggestion.
100%.
Does this work? Does this work?
I'm super happy you mentioned that because I forgot to mention it. And definitely, I would say that a really good way to work to get ahead of technology or whatever to speak to you is having a referral from the CEO. So I'm super glad you mentioned. However, it's very interesting. Once again, you should know your territory and your industry, and there is nothing external people like us can help you with the further research. We can just give you the framework. So I can tell you a very interesting story about how that tip didn't work because of a certain market. So it definitely it worked for me in Germany, it worked for me in the US, in the UK, but my friends that were friends and colleagues who were prospecting the Nordics, so Scandinavian countries where there are flat hierarchies, that didn't work at all. I remember one story. It was super funny when my colleague reached out to the head of something in a Nordic country. This company said, "Hey, I was speaking with your CEO. He or she referred me to me because of this and that." And he replied, "I don't care what my CEO says. Like I'm the owner of this department, and we don't need it." Right. So the thing is, like, imagine if someone is listening to us and applying this tip and then it didn't work. I'm like, oh, the light was no. You need to understand your context. It worked
Got
a
it.
lot of times to me,
Mhm.
but it didn't never work for my colleague who was working in the Nordics. So
Yeah.
once again, like you should know your target persona and your market.
And the
That's your
cultural
duty, and the
setup of the
culture.
market.
That's your job as a salesperson, and that's what makes sales and marketing interesting.
Mhm.
That's exactly the part I like about my job. The parts I don't like is filling up the CRM. I don't like that. I don't like to write summaries after the calls. I don't like to deal with sales engagement tools and build the sequences there. That's the part that AI is taking over a lot as well, which is like, oh,
Mhm.
finally. But the part that's really interesting is this: is understanding
Mhm.
to whom you're speaking and selling to. And if you skip that, forget it. Like there is no one who can help you.
Oh, that's actually you made a very, very good point. It's like there are certain parts which AI can take over, but there are certain parts in terms of context, culture, responses, how do you pitch, and other this thing, which is the basic natural hunting skill, which is more organically human, which you can't replace. And this gives a lot of assurance to sellers also, even if they're
Yes,
selling to
exactly.
technical buyer personas, like they are also humans. And how do you sell to
Well,
humans is you have
yeah,
to take
exactly.
into context of these factors and then make that happen. One other question, which is the same thing, like one is the CEO part. Other thing which some of the technical buyer personas had talked to us about is like, can you work the way ground up? That is, you talk to the engineer or you talk to the lowest level engineer or the tester and other the thing, and then the executive sponsor might be the CTO or the CSO, but the person who might be using or who might be part of this thing would be a lot more lower into this thing.
Yeah.
How do you pitch into that? Yeah.
100%. And once again, I'm super glad you brought that up because,
Mhm.
especially in times that you mentioned, I'm doing research. There are no triggers, there are no funding news, there are no annual reports, there are nothing I can work with.
Mhm.
So a good way for you to get relevant information. And I remember I booked a call with the head of engineer once that converted into a really good deal for the company at the time because I had nothing that could make my life compelling. I just chatted with the software engineers. Hey guys, you are you using this? And they're like, no, we're using that. Why is that? Ah, because of that. Okay, cool. Thanks for letting me know. Then I would go to another one. Hey, I was speaking to your colleague about that. I heard you have this project. Like, yeah, we are doing this project. I'm like, cool. So when I reach out to the CTO or head of engineering, I was like, hey, I know you're working on this. I know you're using this technology. Do you have these particular challenges that's connected to the information I got? If you do, I might be maybe able to help. And this was on LinkedIn, by the way. Going back to the topic there on LinkedIn, this was a LinkedIn conversation I had with the CTO. He
Wow.
booked a call, and then and then we end up closing the deal. So yes, like definitely the bottom up approach. It's definitely great to understand which technologies they are using, right? With challenges, with projects they are using. So definitely talk to people, and as long as you don't ask questions that are, you know, too confidential or that it happened to me that I was trying to find out and like, why are you asking me this? I don't feel comfortable sharing information. You're gonna have that. Once again, security. They are obsessed about security. But another way you can find that information if they are scared off, if they don't reply to you, is if you go to job openings. So when you go to job openings on technical roles, probably you won't understand anything what's there. But usually they say which technology they use. I want a developer who knows these and this language. For example,
Ah,
for salespeople, right? For salespeople, they're like, you like knowing HubSpot is a plus. Okay, then you're using HubSpot, right? You're not using Salesforce, right? So if you go into job descriptions, you get a lot of information on the tech stack of the company, whatever role it is. So you can also start there, maybe go to the engineer and I said, hey, I saw in the job description that you guys use this tool. How happy are you with that? Like, oh, this, that, what would you change, this and that? There you go. You have the information there and it's not creepy.
got it. Oh, that's pretty amazing. And one last thing before we have come to the 1 hour limit and other this thing, which is one thing which is interesting is like most of the tech products and the two when selling to technical buyer personas and other this thing, they've adopted the PLG route. and there is a free tool or something like, let's say you are using Postman, or if you're selling Atlan, or if you're selling this thing, mostly there is a PLG route, there's a PLG product. Engineers are using, salespeople are using that data to do this thing. And in your experience, how is that working overall?
So it depends on a lot on the persona as well. So there are, and also on the person. So there are technical people who say, "Hey, I love to experiment with things before engaging with a salesperson." That is like, no, I don't want to touch in anything. So it depends a lot on the person, and I think in this case you should really do A/B testing and see how it works. Because, for example, I remember when I did an episode with the heads of quality assurance, that was the first thing I mentioned. You want to pick my interest, give me something I can play with, right? Like that's what I want. But then I had, like, for example, because once again they love to research. It's really important that you don't forget that. The more you understand that, the easier it gets on your outreach. But then you have people who are like, no, I don't want to try anything before signing an NDA, right? So it depends a lot on the persona, and again in
And the
your
product.
industry, in the product. Exactly, what does it mean trying out the product, right? For example, on our AI coach, obviously people have security issues because they're analyzing your sales call. Your sales call has private information, right? So even though we offer the free trial, many times they rather have a call with us first before trying out. But if you want to try, I don't know, a video prospecting tool like Vidyard, that's fine, right? They feel comfortable in trying out because it doesn't deal with sensitive information. So we have to understand, what does the free trial entail? What are the risks? And if there is anything that you can improve, maybe you can do another type of free trial, right? If you see that all of your prospects are skeptical in trying, you can understand why is that and make the change. So probably it's not having a free trial, it's having that free trial specifically. But once again, like, and I think we're reaching the end of this live stream. I would say, like, the main thing is research. Please research on your customers, understand what's going on, and iterate, whether it's in your product, in your marketing, in your messaging, in your sales.
Awesome. I mean, Mafalda, this has been pretty intense. We have gone through multiple subsets within this: what works, what doesn't work, culture, cold emails, non-cold emails, video links, so many other this thing. Towards the end, other this thing, like, I mean, people would have a lot more follow-up questions. They would also want to talk a little more about it and this thing. Where do people reach out to you? How do they?
So LinkedIn. I'm not on Instagram and TikTok. I don't like social media. So LinkedIn is the place to go. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or if you need any resources. I have a huge library of resources, also from other people. That when I see on LinkedIn, I was like, oh, this white paper is good, or this carousel is good, so I can share information. But also, I really recommend you, if you're selling to a certain persona and you don't know much about the persona, I have my podcast, A Day in the Life of a Persona. So I have a lot of roles there. If you cannot find yours, let me know, and I'm happy to do an episode on the persona that is not there.
Wow.
But I really recommend. And in the end of the episode, I also show a prospecting email. So you're going to get live feedback from a sales email from your buyer persona. So if you want to hear to the whole thing, which you should, at least listen to the last part. And also I have another podcast, which is Sales Training Greatly Sins, which is like, how can we improve? It's a podcast where you can improve your training. And Sri is there next week. So it's a coincidence. I am releasing your fantastic episode next week, so definitely tune in for that.
We preempted it. We got you on a LinkedIn live before you release our podcast, so that's something which we have done this, and that's great.
Exactly.
We will, Siddharth, we will share the link of Mafalda's podcast here as well. Mafalda, this has been pretty amazing because it's like the world of technical buyer personas. We fundamentally
it's difficult.
Deal with go-to-market people. We deal with SDRs. We deal with this thing because we help SDRs identify who are the high-intent accounts they need to prospect to. We provide the intent data. We also provide data or intelligence from LinkedIn ads. We converge multiple signals to give an account score what to do. But what you had done here is like the context shares. Like, while SDRs can use some level of data, how do you actually reach out to each and every person? How do you actually reach out to a particular kind of person in a certain territory, what kind of proposition which you give, and what is the importance of research, what parts which AI can do. That has been a huge revelation for a lot of us, and most
I'm
importantly for
glad.
me as well. Thanks a lot for your time. We'll be in
My
touch for
pleasure.
sure, and hopefully we'd others. And at least my win would be is like, if anyone who's selling to technical buyer persona, if it's a startup founder, if he can take value from here and go and close a couple of demos and deals down the line, it's a great value for the community.
I'm glad. I'm glad. I'm glad. Thank you so much for the invitation. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. I'll just
Thank
end
you.
this.